So we are now going to segue into our first hack, and I'm looking at the title of it. I think there must be some kind of misprint because it says "Get government money out of higher ed," and we're in Washington D.C. How could we ever suggest that? And Future Tense has as one of its partners, sponsors, a public institution of higher education. So surely you're saying get more government money into higher ed. But to give us this first hack, we have with us Bryan Caplan. Bryan is a professor of economics at George Mason University. He is the author of, among other books, The Myth of the Rational Voter, which was really good. I read that book. And the upcoming The Case Against Education. Bryan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you all for coming. As a college professor, what I notice is that it's very easy to improve student learning. In fact, you can do any number of things and get very predictable results. So for example, you could take attendance. Taking attendance will give you more learning. There's research on the effect of attendance on how much students learn. Attendance actually works. If you want to get attendance up, a simple way is to take attendance and base students' grade on it, and yet outside of a few early classes with freshmen, almost no professors take attendance. Not at George Mason, not any place that I've been at. So that's one way that you could improve learning. Here's one. You could have daily class quizzes. You could actually say, if you don't pay attention today, you will have a reduction in your grade. So you better pay attention each and every day. You better not just say, yeah, whatever, I'm going to figure this out later on. Rather, you can make people pay attention at the time you're talking by saying at the end of this class, there's going to be a quiz on what I said. Right? Or here's another one. You could actually count teaching ability when you make tenure decisions. I am on the George Mason Oversight Committee for Promotion and Tenure, and everyone we denied tenure was denied tenure based upon research. No one was denied tenure based upon their teaching. I made some effort to do that, but no one listened to me. Right? So even people who seem to have the very worst teaching, the very worst teachers are considered to be well above the bar. Good enough. Perfectly fine. Now, what's striking about all these simple improvements, as well as many of the more sophisticated ones that you've been hearing about, and some of the ones you're going to hear about later today, is that most of these easy improvements fall on deaf ears. People just aren't that interested in saying, well, in doing taking attendance or doing a daily quiz or basing tenure decisions in part upon teaching ability, really basing it, not just officially basing it on teaching ability. And it's not so surprising that the suggestions for improving learning fall on deaf ears when you take a look at the labor market numbers, because it really is true that students who graduate from college on average make a lot more money than people who have not graduated from college. If you go into the academic literature, yes, of course, some of the difference in earnings between college graduates and others is due to the student's pre-existing ability. But even after you make adjustments for anything that you can measure, still there seems to be a very large financial payoff for college. Furthermore, it's not just engineering and computer science that are yielding the numbers. You can break it down by majors, and while of course the majors that you think of as being lucrative are in fact more lucrative, even the majors that you think of as not paying, actually adjusting for everything you can think of, still yield a substantial financial gain in the market. So even education majors, adjusting for everything else, seem to make about 25 or 30% more than people who didn't go to college, but did finish high school. Right. So on the one hand, you've got the puzzle that you've got these easy improvements, they're falling on deaf ears, and yet the labor market doesn't seem to care. Labor market doesn't seem to care that students aren't actually learning very much. Now, to me, this suggests that we are misunderstanding the function of college. Probably a lot of the reason why people go to college is not to learn at all. That's not what's going on. That's not what students are trying to do. Furthermore, that's not what employers are actually looking for in a large number of cases. Obviously for engineering, they care whether you've learned engineering. But what about all the people in the non-vocational majors, which is most of them? All right, so suggest that we should rethink the function of college, and this is the heart of the book that I'm writing, The Case Against Education. I say the main function of college, really the main function of formal schooling in general, is not primarily about teaching people job skills. Rather, it is a way for students to signal to the labor market that they are employable, right? And hopefully to signal that they're not just employable, but that they are awesome. There's a whole package of traits that students are trying to signal. So there's the obvious ones like intelligence. When someone does well in school, this is a sign, not a perfect sign, but nevertheless it is a predictor of greater intelligence. Now that's one that's actually pretty easy to cheaply replace. You can just do an IQ test. That might take an hour, 2 hours, cost a few $100s if you get an expensive one. So I focus actually more on some other key parts of the package. So conscientiousness, work ethic. Right? And of course, once you start thinking that a big part of what students are trying to show to employers by doing college is their work ethic, it becomes easy to understand why it is that there isn't a lot of demand for easier ways. Because if there's someone if you go to someone and you say, all right, so, or someone comes to you and says, well, I want to go and show that I'm a really hard worker. What is the easiest possible way for me to show that? Yes. Well, if you take the easiest possible way, that's showing that you are not a hard worker. If you want to show that you're a hard worker, you need to actually do quite a bit of work. Furthermore, it's not enough to say, well, I want to show that I'm a really hard worker, so I'm going to work hard for one day. Now give me a job. That's not enough either, because even a very lazy person will work hard for one day if there's a large financial payoff at the end of it for them. So you actually need to show that you're a hard worker, not only to work hard for a while, or at least to work hard enough, but to do it for a long time. Right? So it may be that you need to show that you're willing to do this work for years before you can actually convince someone that you are genuinely hard worker. But a third thing that I think is probably the real key to understanding college and education in general is students are also trying to signal conformity. In our society, you are supposed to go to college. In our society, you are supposed to finish. If you don't do these things, you have shown that you are willing to violate social conventions. And if you're willing to violate that one, why not another? And when employers are looking for people to hire, they don't want to hire someone who is going to violate normal standards of behavior, right? They want someone who, when they find out what is expected of them, try to excel within the groove that has been assigned to them. Right. So yes, you hire a computer program. You want to be a brilliant computer programmer. You don't want to be saying, well, is this thing really worth doing at all? Maybe we should dump this client. I don't like this. This project is not worthwhile. Yes, one of my best friends from undergraduate days was a brilliant computer programmer. He made a lot of money by distributing games on the early version of the internet and just asking for donations. Every day he was getting about $25. He was getting like 4 to 6 $25 checks from strangers. So imagine how many people were actually enjoying his game. Vast numbers. And yet he dropped out of his first year and was able to get work as a computer programmer, but had a lot of trouble keeping jobs because he had an attitude problem. He was an extreme nonconformist. All right. So a lot of what you're really doing in higher education and in education in general is you are jumping through hoops. You are doing things that you're supposed to do, trying to do them well in order to impress employers when you're done. Right? And a key part of the conformity, of course, is actually finishing. Right, so on the panel, people are talking, well, is finishing overrated? Well, employers are very concerned about someone who says, well, yeah, I did a year of college, but I thought finishing was overrated. Well, maybe you think that following our expectations would also be overrated. Of course, imagining this conversation is actually getting way ahead of ourselves, because probably the person who didn't finish college isn't even going to get an interview. Rather, employers get 300 applications for a job. Step one is they look for any possible reason to not give you an interview. And once they're down to maybe 30, that's when they start the interviewing process. So if you haven't met the paper requirements, you probably aren't even getting a chance to put your foot in your mouth and say things that will make your employer think, well, we don't want to hire that guy. All right. Another way of thinking about the signaling model, or a key part of the signaling model, is that it suggests that the idea of sending more people to college in order to raise their income, it really suffers from a fallacy of composition. The classic fallacy of composition, of course, is imagine we are all sitting here at a concert. Now suppose that any one person in this room wants to see better. What can one person do at a concert in order to see better? Stand up. Therefore, it follows, as night does day, that if everyone stands up, everyone can see better, right? Wrong. Right. The signaling model suggests that the financial benefits of college are very much like that. If you go to college, you make yourself look better compared to other people. You make yourself a more attractive employee. This is likely to improve your chances of getting a job and the pay of whatever job you get. But if everybody does this, if everybody goes to college, then it no longer serves this function. Rather, what this means is that if you want to show off in a world where everyone goes to college, what do you have to do? Get a master's degree. When everyone has a master's degree, what do you need? You need a PhD. When people talk about how the economy's technologically changed, one thing that's quite striking is when the Department of Labor has actually over time assessed what kinds of skills are required for different jobs to actually do different jobs. They've been doing this for at least 40 years. The main thing they find is that the main thing that's changed is not so much what the job requires as what is required to get the job. So there are many jobs which don't require any more skill today than they did 40 years ago. The jobs have barely changed, and yet the required educational credentials to even get an interview to get the job have gone up. So your usual number is that while the average worker now is maybe 2 more years of education than 40 years ago, only about 20% of this is due to the change in the kinds of jobs that people do. Almost all of it, the remaining 80% is because in changing requirements for what's expected to get the job in the first place. So it's the difference between what you need to do the job versus what you need to get what you need to get the job, and it's really what you need to get the job that has changed as education has risen, rather than what you need in order to do the job, which is much more stagnant than people want to realize. And people in this room are in the innovative parts of the economy. There's a lot of parts of the economy that are fairly stagnant and have been for quite a while. All right, now if you accept the story that a lot of what's going on in college is signaling, that's really the main function of it. The reason why people aren't interested in figuring out in actually applying methods of improving learning is that it's not about learning anyway. Once you are willing to buy this story, then there is an uncomfortable implication for someone like me who teaches at a public university, which is, what happens when, in a signaling world, right? When signaling is the main function of college, what happens if you make it more affordable? What happens if you make it easier to do? What happens if you build more universities so it requires less of a commute? Well, of course, there's the obvious answer, was that, more people go to college when you throw more money at it. Yes, but then when more people go, what happens? And in the signaling model, the answer what happens is, not only do you have more college, you also need more college. Right? What happens when more people acquire the credentials is the credential means less, and therefore it really is very much like the fallacy of composition of saying if everyone stands up, everyone can see better. If college becomes more affordable and easier for people to do, of course, more people do it, but at the same time, there is the indirect effect of raising expectations from employers. Now, if college were indeed giving people a lot of useful job skills, then you say, people go or get more money, people acquire more job skills, they're better at doing stuff, they get paid more, society's richer, makes sense. On the signaling model, though, education is primarily redistributive. The main thing you're doing is not actually increasing how much you're going to contribute to the economy. The main thing that you're changing in college, rather, is your slice of the pie. You are changing how seriously people take you. You are going to get, if you have talent, you are more likely to get rewarded for that talent. But in terms of what you actually deliver to the world, not changing. Right? So then what is changing? Like, how is it possible if a bunch of extra people go to college, total production doesn't rise, but all the extra college goers get a raise? How can that be? The answer has to be redistribution. It has to be that other people are getting less because other people look bad in comparison to you when you get more education. All right, so this brings me then to my hack. If the main problem with what's really going on with the college is that people are showing off to employers, if throwing money on the system just increases the amount of showing off without really having much effect on what people can do or their contributions, then the obvious solution is to go backwards. And rather than trying to make college more accessible, cheaper, easier, instead try to make it more expensive, harder, right? Basically to turn back the clock to a time when going to college was something that was unusual. And you're saying, well, that would be terrible. Then a lot of people couldn't afford to go. That's actually the whole point of my hack, right? The whole point is to discourage people from going on the theory, which could be wrong, but which I am very happy to defend, that it is not enriching society to any significant extent when more people to go to college, but rather what we're doing is just raising the amount of education you have to have. So the way that I often explain this to my students is, if people listen to me, a lot of you wouldn't be here. However, you also wouldn't need to be here. So you would be saving years of your life. And of course, if you love listening to me, that's great. But I know a lot of you don't really love listening to me. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just start your lives 2 years earlier, 4 years earlier? Now, finally, to bring this around to hack. So hack is normally supposed to be a very clever and creative idea. My idea is neither clever nor creative. It's just it's something that is so straightforward, so ham-fisted. It's kind of along the lines of being in pre-Columbian Central America and saying, how we use wheels on toys? How about we use wheels on bigger things? That's my hack. All right. So similarly, what I'm saying is,